Greetings to everyone, my name is Syroyid. I'm Doctor of Musicology, Professor of Music Education, and in this video I'll be your music composition tutor. So what we'll be doing is looking at how Rachmaninoff wrote one of his most interesting preludes. And well, it's a very early piece. If I'm not mistaken, he was 18, 19 at the time, teenager, and it really exemplifies a very high sense of virtuosity, not just from the pianistic point of view, because it's a piece that demands of some technical skill, but also musically. And as a composer, I think that it's a masterpiece in terms of musical development and musical thought. And it's so surprising that, well, at such a young age, Rachmaninoff was able to achieve these musical heights in music composition. So without further ado, what we'll do is, what I'll be doing is I'll be playing the piece, and as I play it, I'll be highlighting the different sections that we're having. So this is the Prelude in C# minor, and it belongs, if I'm not mistaken, to Opus 3, the third publication of Rachmaninoff. Starts with fortissimo, and probably you'll recognize all this motif. Mezzo forte. So basically that was probably the loudest point that we can see in the first section, because the section ends here. And now we have a sort of recapitulation . Back to the C#. New harmony and an equivalent cadence, but now it's in C#. And final coda. And after that we have the middle section, which is agitato. So this opening, maybe we can organize it. Let's just try to follow the melody. So the melody clearly sounds a little bit like an introduction because it's fortissimo. And then we have four statements, which basically present the theme in ascending manner. So we're hearing, maybe we can put them with colors. This is the first motif. Well, it's basically there. And it's repeated here in the same key. And now it's slightly higher, so it's in the key of E major. And after that, we'll give it yet another color. We hear it in the dominant key. We're hearing it in G#. So basically Rachmaninoff already with a theme is presenting an arpeggio. Right, I can highlight the notes, but we'll see there the C sharp, there is the E, and that's the G sharp. After that, Rachmaninoff stays just with the orange motif, which is this theme being repeated as it is going to the C sharp, and eventually we have a new motif, which is an inversion. Basically, it's the opposite direction, G sharp, C sharp, right? And we have the actual motif above, right, which is the other one. So that F sharp, G sharp was actually maybe in other places, but I'll highlight that the red one is still there above. So this is the statement, and well, sorry, it's not red, orange, because the red one was for the E major. And this is basically how the first section is structured a little bit motivically. And clearly we have, as we arrive to this dominant, a little bit of a culmination, because Rachmaninoff is arriving to the dominant, right? So that would be a little bit what we have there. We'll get to analyze it more deeply now. But now let's continue. So we have this section B. We should call it section B because it's a contrast. So the first one was section A. This is section B. Section B has a tempo change, and we're moving from lento to agitato. So slightly faster, definitely. And it's usually performed also with some sort of accelerando, but agitato directly means a faster tempo. That's a first statement, and it repeats again now. We had it there to go to A major, right? And now a new statement. That's familiar, we already heard that, so it's a repetition. Obviously now in fortissimo and diminuendo. So this is where it repeats, and now we have the final section, which is just this descent of thirds. And we go back to the original tempo. So this actually is already the beginning, I would say, because it's the same as that introduction we were hearing. And the original theme, the first time we of course heard it in pianissimo triple P, now we're hearing it with triple F and quadruple F, with a very, very deep range in. Also there's this very unique writing, so I would say, well, this is section A prime. The recapitulation, but it's also very unique writing because you're seeing four staffs to indicate like a doubled piano. But obviously we play right hand the top ones and left hand the bottom ones. So with Pella, I'll start here, sounds like this. And now. We have the same modulation actually to E. major, and we go to G sharp. G sharp minor. All very heavy sound. Reminds me a little bit of the sound you might find in Mussorgsky, where you're having that sort of and it's important to realize that Rachmaninoff was raised in that tradition, and by that time at the early 20th century, well, end of 19th century, this music by Mussorgsky, which was published in the 70s, was extremely popular, and many pianists tried to play it. So I can see this expansive language connected a little bit to there. Also in terms of the key, because it's G sharp minor, we have this sort of Mussorgsky triadic harmony. That's the new harmony. And this is very similar. All of this passage, in spite of sounding so massive, so far has been a copy and paste of the exposition. And now we have the actual coda. So this would be the coda section. And this coda section in a way anticipates Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto that has a similar sort of idea of bass and chord. So we have very interesting chord changes. We'll talk about them. And finally, E sharp minor with a quite open sound. We have the dominant or the fifths at the top. So, well, it's a unique piece. It's clearly showing the early young genius of Rachmaninoff, and almost everything about it is perfect. I mean, there is this dramatic moment, there is expressive moments, there is the suspense, you have all sorts of characters, there is the virtuosity, right? Of course, I need to apologize in advance for all of the mistakes I'll be making today, because Rachmaninoff's music is particularly challenging, and well, I'm just side reading the piece. I haven't studied or played it, so it requires actual study and practice in order to perform it properly and get all of the details played properly. But well, as I was saying, it's got everything. So what we'll be doing is explaining to the best of my ability the compositional techniques that are inside of the first section. Then we'll go with the recapitulation, which is basically the same thing but expanded. And eventually, well, we'll just look at the middle section and the coda. So that's going to be the plan. So let's begin with the exposition. The first thing that I'll do is I'll label this motif with some letter. So we can label this motif X. And we'll talk a little bit about it. So this motif functionally already conveys some tonal meaning. So did we hear this motif anywhere before? Well, obviously there is much music of Beethoven is based around that idea. So you might have that typical cadence, right? Where we're moving through either the 1-6-4-5-1 or directly 6-5-1. Now, 6-5-1 is a very modern statement because traditionally the subdominant was conceptualized not so much as the 6th degree, but much more as the 4th or the 2nd degree. So obviously, if Rachmaninoff would have done this, it would be equally strong, but it would be way more conventional and it would lack a lot of the drama. Likewise, if he would have done a 2-5-1, sounds dramatic at the opening, but then you can see, well, the harmony would need to be other, and it really wouldn't, it would lose a lot of its character. So I'm very glad that Rachmaninoff didn't pick any of these two options and actually did this one, because in a way this motive, well, the definition of it could be, well, subdominant, dominant, and tonic. That's basically what it is. This motive conveys inside of it another micro motive, and the micro motive, it's a minor second. So this would be the motive Y, right? We can give it the letter Y, and it's basically the minor second down, descending, right? And this minor second down that's going downwards is definitely something that gives Rachmaninoff a lot of work and a lot of materials for further development. Let's just try to highlight all of the minor seconds. We can see it at the beginning. So since we've been using orange, red, and green already, and we've used blue for the inverted one, I'm now running out of colors. I'll maybe need to pick, let's do purple, right? So purple will be our minor seconds. The score will have a lot of purple. And so we have this. Okay, new color, and let's highlight it. So we have there a minor second. We have a minor second here. And needless to say, it's one minor second, another minor second. And well, it's also in the bass. Maybe we can just better highlight it there. So it's this harmony. That sounds familiar? Yes, it does. I mean, we'll be hearing it there. Right, so maybe I'm already anticipating, but that's going to be the motive that characterizes everything that follows. So it's this motive Y. We can put it here. Maybe. So this motive Y, and this is motive X. And basically, I mean, it's quite straightforward, but the more we look into it, you can see how the second transforms. And well, this is a variation of that second, but in the end, it is the motive of the second inverted, right? So here we have it diatonic inverted and invert. But really what Rachmaninoff is doing is building the entire piece from just these two melodical materials. That's extremely minimalistic and very risky, because when you only use two cells to build an entire piece, the first thing that you're risking is to become overly boring, repetitive, right? And somehow Rachmaninoff makes this piece extremely exciting. So the first thing that we would need to do, well, after we just, well, highlight all of the motifs, we can just do it for a bit more. So we have it there. You might be thinking, but what is the C sharp, B sharp to C sharp? Well, I think that could be the first instance of the inverted one, right? So that's the inverted motive. Maybe we can give it a slightly different color, because if not, everything will just look purple. I mean, the whole score has these motifs, so I wouldn't be surprised that eventually when we look at the score, all we'll see is just the motive of the second. So I'll put them here with maybe this bluish color, which is slightly brighter. And well, if it's not one, it's the other. And since both hands are going in parallel, really we're having this very continuous dialogue of the two parts, right? I could highlight it here. It's moving around. And well, basically the other one is there. right? So that's pretty much, well, here we don't have it, it's just a static note. That's pretty much how Rachmaninoff is creating the music. Now, this all unfolds here with repetition, so I won't be just writing it all again because I want to highlight other details, and then we have this dissolution. So let's focus on the harmony of the first half, because I think there's a lot we can say about harmony here, and already the score looks quite messy with all of these colors, and we haven't even yet started to talk about harmony. So the first thing is C sharp, and we're seeing C sharp minor. It's tonic. And Rachmaninoff clearly treats the piano like two instruments. I think, well, here it's easy to see, but if you look at here, it's clearer. So we have just one which is, and the other one which is, right? And it's basically the contrast of these two instruments or two melodic lines. The counterpoint of that is what creates this beauty, right? So I think it's very compelling, because when it's played properly, it will actually almost sound like two people are playing. You're having two instruments, separate dimensions. But it's tonic in this first chord. The next one is actually E major, right? But since we already heard the C sharp and it's being sustained, I don't think that we really perceive that much as a E major modulation, but rather as an C sharp minor seventh. C sharp minor seventh. And then we have this, and I play the bass again, so because it's supposed to be sustained, and you'll hear this. So that is the full chord. This full chord is D sharp, F double sharp, A sharp, and C sharp. So what is that? That's, as far as we can call it, it's a dominant seventh chord. It's the dominant of the dominant, right? It's the D sharp dominant seventh that is supposed to go to G sharp. So Rachmaninoff is doing this. Very typical romantic cadence. But there is an exceptional resolution, because that dominant seventh does resolve to the dominant, right? It's there. So we have this. But in between of these two things, Rachmaninoff places this chord, right? And what is this chord I'm highlighting with pink? Well, since we had pink for another thing, I'll just put it maybe in blue, right? So what is this blue chord that we have here? Well, it's a very exciting way of harmonizing that initial A that we were talking. It's subdominant tonic, but Rachmaninoff harmonizes it like this, right? And what is that chord? Well, it's the way it's written. It sounds like a dominant seventh, but it's not a dominant seventh. It's an augmented sixth. It's a German augmented sixth chord, which is the equivalent of dominant seventh orally. So when I'm hearing a dominant seventh chord, let's say D dominant seventh. It's D, F sharp, A, C natural. That goes to G major, right? So D dominant seventh goes to G. But in this case, Rachmaninoff doesn't go to G. He goes to C sharp. So how do we explain that? Well, the first thing is to understand how augmented sixths work in general. When you have an augmented sixth, and this is the one that we're having, the German augmented sixth, the proper thing to have is to resolve the D, have it in the bass, and this B, have it above, and resolve them by contrary motion, like this. So if this German augmented sixth chord would happen in C sharp minor and Beethoven would use it, he would do something like this. Right. So the German sixth that we're having here is not of the C sharp minor key, it's F sharp minor. It's an F sharp minor augmented sixth chord. And the augmented sixth chord in F sharp minor was supposed, in this case, to resolve to, well, the dominant, which is C sharp. Now, how does Rachmaninoff violate, well, this rule and invent something new? It's because he doesn't treat it really as an augmented sixth. He writes it as such, and there is no question about it, but he is doing a very interesting rule, or that Beethoven was using a lot in his string quartets for modulations in certain developments, and it's this equivalence of Neapolitan chord and augmented sixth chord. So what we're seeing here, basically, it's a Neapolitan, which is D major, right? And the Neapolitan, it's in Moonlight Sonata. We were analyzing it on the channel. That's it. So Rachmaninoff's taking exactly the Moonlight Sonata chord progression, but doing it here. And instead of doing it as a normal Neapolitan, he adds the sevenths. And the rule that arises is that the dominant chord, this dominant seventh Neapolitan, is the equivalent of the German augmented sixth chord in this case. Of course, the relationship would be that the dominant of that Neapolitan is, but we're now in this key of C sharp minor, so basically it's not a functional chord that we're having here. And another way of looking into it, it's altogether seeing it as a one single chord, because I could play the dominant chord with this D, and the ninth. So that would be those two chords at once played. That's the first. That's why the pedal can be very generously added here, and the sonorities don't seem to clash a lot. But in reality, well, that's the theory behind it. So you have a Neapolitan chord, which is the flat 2, and C sharp minor is D major, and you also are seeing the German augmented sixth. The augmented sixth is actually resolving in a very twisted manner, but it's in the melodic motion. So you're having this resolution here, right? And needless to say is that is an inversion of the first motive that you were seeing. So motive 1 is, we have it up and down, minor third up and down, and now this descending third, and then ascend. So 3 and 2, and then 3 and 2 in the opposite direction. That sort of contrasting, well, or inverted motion characterizes primarily, the opening, but it's also becoming part of the entire development, because if you look into this, that's again that same motive, right? And the other one, we're seeing it more times, right? Well, not that many, because then it changes. But this is the harmony. As you can see, it's already very sophisticated. But the interesting thing is, Rachmaninoff is not throwing these harmonic changes all the time, but he just explores one harmonic change that's very unique, because not many composers have done this. And then he is not afraid of repeating it. And this is a very important lesson for composers, because many times we might start having great ideas and very sophisticated harmonic turns, and what we try to do is we try to include them as many times as we can, and try to add even more chords. But if you want a beautiful chord, like in this case, this dominant seventh, which is augmented sixth chord, and Neapolitan at the same time, if you want that chord to stick and people to remember it and tell people how beautiful that chord is, you'd better repeat it. And Rachmaninoff is basically restating the same harmony here, we have it there, down here again, and here with some variation, but basically it's analogous, I would argue, to some degree. And then in the fortissimo part, we're also hearing it. No added notes. I mean, this is the very same augmented sixth chord, right? And it's repeated once more there. And even after the climax, which is the triple fortissimo, we hear it one more time, right? So Rachmaninoff, just looking if he does it a last time, it will be interesting. But no, I think he is just getting tired of it by then, and he doesn't do it in the coda. But we're hearing it 3 times there, we're hearing it 3 times here. 6 times it's repeated in the exact same chord progression. Six times, right? So I think that's quite remarkable, and partially it's what makes the piece memorable. If Rachmaninoff were to reharmonize every single instance of it, it wouldn't repeat 3 times the same chord progression. We would not be able to recall it probably with such ease, and well, the chord would just get buried under a very big wealth of ideas and chord changes. So let's continue. Now, once we have this, and it's just played 2 times, Rachmaninoff is changing the melody. So the melody, which was the 3rd time, and this is a very good rule for composers to remember it. When you're writing a motive, do it 2 times, it's fine. If you're doing it a 3rd time, try to give some variation. So we have this. 1st time. 2nd. 3rd is different. Right? And the difference is a new motive appears, which is not extremely sophisticated. I mean, it's not like very unique material, but it's definitely something different, and it's an ascending fifth. And whenever you have an ascent of a fifth moving upwards, 5 notes up, you're having this heroic elevation. So then the scale goes down, and we're in a new key, right? So it's also very, very unique harmonization of the typical. This goes back to Renaissance music, right? They were doing that a lot. Leading tone goes to resolves. Now Rachmaninoff is doing it with this harmony, and that is the half diminished chord that we see in Debussy and Wagner. So the half diminished chord goes to the dominant, right? But now we'll see. So we're in the key of E major, which is basically where we go from C sharp, E, and then G sharp. This chord is the 2nd degree, and it's inverted, so we have this C inversion in 7th. But the interesting thing about it is that it's this half diminished. So if I were to do it in E major, the normal thing to do a 2nd degree inverted would be this. And we can all agree that that doesn't sound right. It doesn't transmit all of the greatness and the musicality that this has. So the C natural does not belong to E major. Where does it belong to? Well, he is borrowing it, and this is what some music theorists call modal interchange or exchange. He is borrowing it from E minor. So we have E major with all of its scale, but all of a sudden, in order to make this scale more interesting, we introduce notes from the minor mode. And we arrive to this scale. That's exactly the scale that he does. It's what some theorists describe as the harmonic major scale. right? In Chopin's famous E flat major nocturne, we see it there. So it's this flat 6. Right, that would be an E major, right? Same thing. So that is creating the half diminished. It's very interesting, half diminished. And then we have the typical dominant 7, so nothing special. Well, something has to be said about this voicing and all of the voicing series, that they're interlocked, which is very unique writing, because you have these octaves and the octaves in the opposite hand. And in a way, that's the main parallel 6 structure. That's having a filler note, which is also in octaves, right? So in reality, it's like we were thinking of it as triadic harmony. And you could play it like this, just 3 and 3, but it's written in this way, and it's I think when you play it as written, you will get a much more highlighted differentiation of those octaves. Like that line, and it's also partially slowing you down, which is really important because this piece can be played very quickly and it says lento, so the character has to be maintained there. Well, there we have it. So 2-5-1, it's there. Anything particularly remarkable about this? Well, it's very beautiful, definitely. And why is it so? Well, in reality, Rachmaninoff is not, again, rediscovering something completely different. He is just copying this. All right, probably that wasn't the best color selection I did. That should be empty, and this is orange. So he's copying this. Just a third above. And this sequential usage of harmony is very good. It's extremely effective, and it gives a lot of coherence. So here we have a sequence. Basically, the original is copied a third above. Third above. Ascending third. And after that, well, we get this very spicy dissonance of the second. Here was a major second, now it's a minor second. After that, we have the modulation to G sharp minor. So it sounds like this. And is it anything different? Well, it's the exact same device. It's 2 half diminished, and it's this dominant 7th. In fact, when I played it the first time, you could go to E minor too. Right? It can be in E minor. Same as this one could be in major. Right? So they're interchangeable. But definitely Rachmaninoff tries to remain diatonic in these resolutions, so that justifies having C sharp minor, E major, and G sharp minor. It also sounds a little bit modal, because when you go to G sharp minor, what happens is, in particular if you're doing it in the way that Rachmaninoff does it with no accidentals, you're creating the Phrygian mode. What is the Phrygian mode? The Phrygian mode is the minor scale with the flat 2. Well, there you have it. Neapolitan is flat 2, by the way. So here we have the Phrygian mode, spelled like this, Phrygian. And the Phrygian mode, it's the major scale, the third note of the scale. So if I'm in E major, G sharp is the Phrygian. Right? Shostakovich really uses that a lot in his music. But most naturally, the Phrygian mode was used a lot in flamenco, Spanish music. So we have it like this. Right? It's usually major Phrygian. But in this case, it's a natural diatonic minor Phrygian, and it definitely gives us a very unique sonority, almost like Debussy, I would say. In Debussy, you also might find these sorts of chords moving in parallel motion. They're non-functional. I mean, I could tell you, well, this is 5, 6, 4, 5, 3, but it's not functional harmony. It's what we call a chord melody or a chordal melody. So the melody, which is, needless to say that it's a little bit similar to right, sounds a little bit like Bach's famous toccata and fugue, right? Well, partially, maybe all of these resemblances to Beethoven's Moonlight, Bach's Toccata and Fugue, also adds to this popularity to the piece, because when we hear it, it doesn't sound like something completely new or something completely different from everything that you can connect to. But you can definitely kind of connect it to things. So this is Bach's Toccata, D minor. Well, there we had Moonlight Sonata. Moonlight. So these are a little bit of some references. I mean, probably you can leave in the comments your own version of this and say, all right, but maybe this is also reminding me of another piece. And I would be really glad to know it in here, because this would enrich the analysis and give us a better understanding of it. But definitely this is like Debussy sonority. So you have this Debussy chordal harmony. Right, we already mentioned it. Also, sometimes they call it mixtures, for that term, mixture in French. So when you have the mixtures, it's when you're moving like this. Just thinking now of Cathedral Angloutique. I mean, it's basically Bach played in Debussy style, right? And then we arrive at that moment. So this is an extension of a dominant. It's what we also call a standing on the dominant. And it definitely performed that function. And all of this, I mean, now that's filled with color, it's harder to follow, but it's the typical structure of a sentence where you have opening idea, and now we have closing idea. And we close there. So that's the sentence. It's a little bit asymmetrical because you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, where the structure is a little bit like, well, depending how you look into it, you can see even 5 because the actual motif starts halfway through. So we won't be really delving into those details, but clearly you should be aware of the fact that there is an opening and a closing statement. There is this question and answer, call and answer structure, but at the same time it's very asymmetrical. So Rachmaninoff himself tries, like, with the rhythm to give a lot of flexibility. Just look at the opening. It's not really the motif starting here. It's not, right? But it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I think that not every performer actually plays that C sharp as it's notated, because we tend to think of it short. Well, actually, I miscounted. It's not 6, it's 5, but still, it's like extremely long, right? So what we would expect is to have it in a more proportionate ratio to what we have afterwards. So this is the second phrase after this line, and the second phrase starts in a similar manner. We have the repetition of that augmented sixth, the ascending sequence. And this is the new chord that I really, really like. What is it? It's another half diminished chord, but it's not written as well. It's written in a very unusual way. The C would need to be natural in order to make it half diminished, like F sharp, A, C natural, E. But it's written like this with the B sharp. So in a way, this chord is the same chord as this. Why in the first place he writes it with C natural, then with B sharp? It's because he wants to highlight the enharmonic equivalence of these two pitches. And it's the fact that when you look at it, well, B sharp and C natural are the same note. They are exactly the same note. But they are written differently, not for caprice. It's not just like, oh, here's C natural, because they're in different keys. This is in E major. So in E major, you have flat 6. Is what we call the flat 6 degree, flat 6. There, in the B sharp, it's in C sharp minor, and it's what we call the leading tone. So it's resolving up, and it does so. Here it's going downwards. Right. So basically, this is a very compressed version. It's a compression. It's condensation. That's another way of describing it. So basically, Rachmaninoff is condensing this with this chord, the half diminished, the equivalence that we had before, but the sequence, instead of moving upwards, now it's just stuck. And it's there. So it's and it's also not even played 2 times, so that's another interesting element. So that was the 5th motive. It's like shrinking and at the same time changing a few things so you stay in the same key. Because obviously the first time we went to the dominant, now Rachmaninoff wants to stay in the tonic to close the section and have a conclusive feel. Right, so the equivalent and chords, well, the way it's written, it's again not exactly the proper one, but if we were to spell it, probably it's just the 4th degree half diminished, right? So it's flat 5, 7 flat 5. And that goes to the dominant, and eventually it resolves to this tonic. So again, here we have a very interesting way of reusing materials. We had this, which was this sort of material that is descending scale, and now it's just repeated there. It's repeated, but the first time was in G sharp minor, now it's in C sharp minor, so it's C sharp minor Phrygian. So we have C sharp Phrygian. And C sharp Phrygian, if here we had, now it's, and it highlights very well, I think, the D natural, which was we were talking about, which is the flat 2. D natural, which is flat 2, and it's also Neapolitan. Right. So we can clearly see how this is just a transposition. Now we hear it lower. And we have a final statement, which is this one, which includes the inversion. Right. So the motif, the orange one, I highlighted very quickly here, but the actual orange motif moves like this. So we have it there, A, C sharp, G sharp and C sharp, D, D, tone, and the bass is contrary motion. Right. Also, we should put here as a sequence, a reference of G sharp. And here we have a contrary motion statement. After that, he keeps descending, so we have a descent of range. Descent of range, we're getting a smaller, right? So smaller in size and also like lower in terms of range. And this is basically the final statement of that same harmony. So I believe I said that it's just 6 times. Now we have 2 more, so it's 8 repetitions of this gorgeous chord. I remember the color was blue, I think, yeah. So we have it there, right? Not like this. You keep mixing the colors here, sorry. So we have it there, and 1 more time here. So 8 times so far this chord, right? That would be the smallest statement of the exposition. So the smallest statement. We have the original one, which was like this. And we'll have the largest one, which is this largest statement. Right, so it's clearly like 3 different ways of doing exactly the same notes, same harmony, same chords, but different orchestration. This remains pretty much the same. When he does it bigger, he adds more octaves and a chord, but this is very different. So it's now voiced like that, and initially it was voiced like. So we also now hear a different interval because we're hearing this parallel fourths. And it's very important because that is anticipating directly the motif that we're about to hear afterwards. So if you listen just to this, you can clearly see the connection of the 2 sections. At first, of course, it sounds like it might look like, oh, this is completely new. It's unrelated. It just Rachmaninoff is starting to invent new material. But if you closely pay attention, it's derived from that motif Y, but it's also made it very explicitly here. So we are hearing already the same range. That's the first chord. So this works in a way like a transition. Basically, that's what the function it performs. It's definitely a coda ending, but it's also a transition, and a very unique form of transition because it's one that allows you to experience the motivic transformation from A to B. And you hear clearly how we're moving from and now we have agitato. Right, so we'll now get to analyze the agitato, but since we have a very fresh vision of, well, how this section was analyzed, and I don't really have too much space left to explain more, well, I'll put here this because this is a structural difference. I mean, that's a coded. So for me, I'll just write it here. It's an introduction of 2 bars. That's what we have there. I would argue even 3 bars because the resolution is there. The motif for me starts as a pickup. So the theme is there, or even here, but it's a pickup. So it's 0, that's bar 0, that's bar 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we have phrase, first phrase, which is an open phrase. It's 6 bars. The intro, it's closed because it's in tonic, right? I'll put here closed means in tonic, open here means dominant, and actually it's a minor dominant. G sharp minor, I didn't write it here, G sharp minor. And after that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, just a statement of 4. So second phrase, it's closed, it's in tonic, and it's 4 bars because then you have a coda, which is closed in tonic, and it lasts 2 bars too. I think it was 2 bars. Yeah, we have just these 2 because then that's the resolution of it. I mean, I wouldn't say that the section begins right there. I mean, you have clearly the bass connecting there. So this would be the structure of it. Now you could argue that you could connect these 2 sections of the coda and group this maybe in something more symmetrical and say, all right, Rachmaninoff is doing here 6. That makes sense. He's doing there yet another 6. Of course, here those 6, why does he do 6 instead of 4? Because you have 4 of the phrase plus 2 of the extended half cadence, right? Or the standing on the dominant. So because of that standing on the dominant, we have the 4 plus 2, right? So this is how we arrive to those 6. I'll put it there with an arrow. But 6 plus 6 is much more symmetrical, and you could view all of this as a 12, and 6 plus 6, what we can call a compound period, right? So a compound period that has an opening idea, is repeated 2 times, and then you have the closing, and then the opening again, and then the closing, which has the opening as an ending again. So this is basically what we're seeing at a broad stroke. So we should be expecting now to see the same 12 bars of compound period, or if not 12, just 10, because that ending can be left, and the introduction. So let's see if that's happening. So we do have the introduction, and definitely I would argue that's also the same 3 bars. So intro with 3 bars. I'll just give it maybe one color. So let's give it yellow. That's the introduction. Depending on how you look into it, you might think, well, maybe it's just up to there. Then we have the thematic opening idea. So this is the opening idea. You can see clearly how it repeats. So I'll put it there. That was the intro. This is opening idea. It's repeated. And all of this is the first phrase, right? So far it's identical to how Rachmaninoff does it in the soft manner of the opening, when it's more gentle. Now we have the change. So it's basically doing a sequence, and it's this closing idea, right? So it's closing idea, and we have a sequence. So basically a third above. That's what we have. And after that, we have a standing on the dominant. Let's give it maybe a green color. So standing on the dominant with these beautiful sequences that sound like Debussy, I would say, right? Actually, he does it in 2 rounds up to there. And from there we start. So this is an extension, cadential extension, or standing on the dominant. Extension where he is standing on the dominant. Now we have a red again, so that's opening idea, and opening idea one more time, right? And it's slightly different. Well, we have now the extension, which works as a closing idea, so that's worth mentioning. So this is the green, and after that we have the final statement, which I would give it another color, orange, because it's the inverted motif. right? So that's the structure. Now, as you can see, there is this red, there is something that differentiates, and then there is this red repeating again, and something contrasting. So that is basically the definition of what a period is. Of course, you can look at it as two phrases, but I'll repeat here, well, we had it above there. So this was a structure. We had intro, first phrase, second phrase, and coda. But maybe with these colors now here, it might be easier to see it again, but I'll put it, you have the intro, 3 bars, plus first phrase, which is these 4 measures, plus 2, and second phrase, where we have just the 4 bars, because there's no coda. We don't have the coda. Well, there is a coda, it's just a separate coda. So you have these 4 bars which start there. And we'll now talk about the coda. So that's basically my overview of the recapitulation. It's here, section A, recapitulation. It's clearly the culmination. Well, here there are 2 opinions. Of course, when you're playing this, you have to make it sound climactic, and it should sound like you're playing bold and full, and it's like and even Rachmaninoff himself, when he asked you to play something 2 times, he asks for more volume second time, please. So he writes 3 Fs pesante and then sforzatissimo with quadruple F, right? And then he arrives to this sforzatissimo again. So all of this clearly points to the fact that this section is loud. But from the structural point of view, the climax usually, it's not the resolution of it, but it's the maximum tension. And clearly the maximum tension, or the climactic section, is this standing on the dominant. Because it's the point of maximal buildup. You have all of this energy here, and of course it's descending, so probably the moment that you're up, it's really like strong. But then it's all of this dominant. And I would say that this dominant specifically, which is the one that you hear before the recapitulation, is the most tense. Because if you stop here, I mean, the entire piece falls apart. You expect it to resolve. So this is the point prior to recap that's the loudest. Of course, Rachmaninoff plays with that sense of tension and just dramatically expands. And how does he do so? Well, there are just a couple of techniques. The first one, we said, he adds more octaves. So he has quadruple octaves. Well, we have it, more octaves. He has low chords. These sound almost like, whenever I teach students how to write chords, this is exactly how I tell them not to write them, because I say, if you write a chord that's very low, it will sound very muffled. Now, whoever of my students received that advice, they might be watching this and saying like, you told us never to write here a chord, and now you're showing how to write one and explain it. Well, really, if you do it in this way, you can do it. I mean, it's very effective. But you should know what's the effect that you'll achieve. So if you're just doing an accompaniment and you want it to be effective for a melody, probably it might be better to do an octave higher, or even here, right? So if you're accompanying a melody. But if what you want to do is the effect of a tam-tam or a bass drum, which is basically what we have here, is this low dissonant chord, and here's where the acoustics happen to be very handy, because something we don't realize is how frequency works. A lot of the musicians, when we think about and we play the piano, all the pitch seems to be equal. So I'm playing an A minor here, above, below, it's very similar, it's the same shape. But in terms of frequency, and this is very clear for string players, bow string players, or even guitar players, the higher you go, like the smaller the distance that you have there. And why is this happening? Basically, it's because of how frequencies work. So if I have here my A and let's say my A it's 440. Hopefully it's tuned so in the video. So if I'm doing an A that's an octave below, it's 220. And an octave below is 110. And an octave below is 55. So basically I'm dividing by half, right? Now you might be saying, well, why are you explaining this? Well, I'm explaining it to show you how many hertz you would have if a chord would happen here. So you just realize between this A and this A, I have 440 hertz of distance. And if I were to do a chord, it sounds pretty nice. I mean, it's not, the frequencies are very spread apart. You have one at 300, maybe one at 500, 700, whatever. There is distance. If I go from here A to A, I said it's 220, that's 110, this is 55. And from here down to there is just 27.5. If my math doesn't fail, that's the half of 55. So the distance that you have between these two notes is just 27.5 hertz. It's very small. It's not even the hundreds. And if you do a chord, it's going to be even smaller. So what happens if two frequencies are very close in terms of hertz? What you'll hear is a beating sound above. You can hear this sort of vibration. And this is a good effect to show you how a low chord, because all these frequencies are very narrow, becomes dissonant. So if I play it here, you can clearly hear that's, I mean, I could play here a major chord, but the first thing that you hear is not a major chord. You hear like a clash of sound, of dissonance, that is nothing to do with this, which is a very clear and crystal clear sonority. So the lower we go, the more the sounds blend. And Rachmaninoff, knowing this, he plays specifically this chord, not because he wants you to hear C sharp. He could even do C minor there, right? It would still like have the similar effect of dissonance. So you can tune down the notes and play literally even a cluster there. Adding more notes, and you would still get this sort of tom-tom bass drum sound. Of course, if you do it with the notes of the chord, it's going to be cleaner within the resonance that you can have. But definitely that's the reason why low chords are usually discouraged my students to write if they don't know it, like, because if you don't think about this pitch of pitch frequency space, you might be just thinking that it's the same to write a chord here than write it down below. But they work completely differently. And this is a perfect example of how to use low chords properly. I mean, Moonlight Sonata, you start with these arpeggios, but Waldstein actually starts with a similar concept of low thirds. They are a little bit higher than Rachmaninoff, but this is probably one of the lowest chords that we have in that time repertoire. All right, so having said this, let's now, go to the middle section. But before we go there, just a quick remark. I wanted to say something about how it's written. So more octaves, we said this low chord, I've explained it. I think it's now clear why I discourage some students to do it, but if you do it like this, it can work. Now, the other third ingredient is the chords that he has above. So he writes on the right hand this, and many times when we think about chords, the first thing that comes to our head is just to do, in our mind, is to do the same thing in both hands. And that's not what Rachmaninoff does. So he says these chords at an interval. Basically, this one starts on C sharp, and that one is a third above, on E. And you can clearly hear the difference between this voicing and the octaves. I'll play octaves. Right, that's how octaves sound. Left and right are doing the same. And I'll play it as Rachmaninoff wrote it. You can clearly hear that this is better than, because the first one is more direct. Here you have like a second melody. And you can basically even play with that melody and highlight it more. If you only have one melody because both hands play the same, it's too direct, right? Too predictable. So this is also something to highlight here. And basically it's connected to how the music was written the first time. It was interlocked. So when I expand, that's how it becomes, right? That melody is complementing the other one. All right, so now I think we've spoken enough about this. Let's get to the middle section. The middle section, it's very fascinating because it has a linear direction and a linear motion that's just taking us from low to high, and from mezzo forte to fortissimo to triple F, quadruple F in this explosion. Right, so let's just play it so we can have it fresh in our mind. Right, so far that repetition tells us it's a period. And now we have a new section, section B, I guess. And that was a very bold cadence. We'll now talk about it. A again. Repeats. And that's the culmination. And we arrive to the opening. Interestingly, the tempo, it's not changing here, so supposedly you're supposed to still count and play that faster, and now go to the slow tempo. But well, some people just slow down there because it's really like this point of tension that I would actually call the actual climax of the piece, because it's an overlap of both sections and it arrives in I think one of the most bold manners that you can imagine it. So let's now analyze this. Section B, it's a ternary form. We have B1 up to here. This would be B2, and then we have B1 prime. And after that, it's ascending on the dominant. We can call it B3 if you want. So also it's a little bit connecting to B2, so maybe you could call it B2 if you B2 prime, and we'll see more of this two repetition binary form. So if that's the case, let's basically, well, motivically we won't be talking much because I mean, I think it's evident that basically the entire section is just a descending sequence of seconds. Second, 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 second. All we have is, well, we have here some other motive. What is that motive? It's the motive of the fifths. Is that new? Well, we've heard this. I mean, we've heard it here. When that was happening. So, but everything is just seconds. Down, down, down. Even here. So everything is based around that. Now, the other thing is that we have arpeggios and triplets. So triplets are a new rhythm. And they basically speed up. speed time up because firstly we were only hearing eighth notes, and now we're hearing triplets, which are way faster. And also triplets are present here in a faster tempo, which is agitato, right? So basically two times Rachmaninoff is trying to speed up. The chords previously were never arpeggiated. That's interesting to note. So we always had block chords, right? And here we're having arpeggios. So that's the contrast. And I think like in all good sonatas and A-B theme, we could do the chart and basically see the differences. So in one case it's fortissimo and you have two elements. In this case it's just one element because it's more unified. Here we had pauses and silences. Now it's like this rhythm is more constant. The motif had the ascending motion. Now it's mostly descending, but the arpeggios are ascending. The speeding up against the slower tempo. Here we had this sort of curve, bell curve, where getting louder then softer. In the agitato section, you're just getting louder each time, louder. So I think we already did similar charts for other pieces, and you can build your own here and just sit down and just say, what are the differences? And you'll be surprised to see how many of them you'll be encountering. Because in the first case, I think, well, even just look at this. Harmonically, this was going from C sharp to E, from E to G sharp. So this is the path, right? It's a very common path. Many pieces do that. But in this case, section B, it's the opposite. You have C sharp. C sharp goes to A. And from A, you can hear C and F sharp, right? So it's, now it's, right? And the further you look into it, I'm sure that Rachmaninoff was fully aware of all of these things, because he definitely, to write something like this so coherent and based around this technique of motivic development, he had Beethoven's music in mind. And even at that age, it's very likely he played his first piano sonata. And the first piano sonata, it's a master lesson on how to do two opposite themes. So don't just write one theme and then something that sounds different. No, but make sure that every single way, in every single aspect you look into it, it's just something contrasting. And I think this is pretty much it. So if we spend more time into it, you will be able to clearly encounter all of these contrasting elements. But now, since we want to complete this faster, because we need to also comment the coda, what we'll do is just comment the overall structure with the same sort of colors we were doing before. So we're having this opening idea, right, which is repeated twice, by the way. Let's just do it as proper. So we have this repeat, and now we have a closing idea. So we'll give it the blue color. It's this. We'll talk about harmony, so we'll get to explain how these chords are based. But let's just for now overview a little bit the entire structure. So we have again the same opening idea. And we have now a different closing idea. So in this case, and this is another contrast to add to the chart, structure is perfectly regular. So we have B1, it's 8 bars, and it's 2 of opening idea, plus 2 of closing idea, plus 2 of opening idea, plus 2 of closing idea. This is what we call a period. And it's a modulating period because it ends into A major, right? So if you remember the first case, we were not having a period, we were having a sentence, and it was an asymmetrical sentence, one of 6, another 4. Now it's just this straight 8 structure, very clear, 2 plus 2, 2 plus 2, and it's modulating up to, first was modulating up to E major, G, C sharp. Now we're going down to A, right? So that's B1. B2, now let's analyze B2. B2 does not behave as a period. clearly it's more of a sentence because you can see these 3 bars that are just, well, sequence. And then you have 2, which are the closing. And in this case, I think Rachmaninoff rebels a little bit against the convention, because the conventional thing to do, the one that Beethoven would do, it's to have this and then resolve it. So what did I do there? I've just built on a dominant. But here, before we arrive to B1, he is resolving the dominant. Resolving the dominant. And that resolution of the dominant is very unconventional and unorthodox. You wouldn't expect it. It works marvelously. It works very well here because it provides you drama, so you can have this. You can even play the same pedal. Needless to say, this is the same phrase. So, same phrase as B1. And in this case, there's a little change, because here, remember, we were going to A major. But where do we go now? We go to F sharp minor. So it's a modulation to F sharp minor. Is that a coincidence? Is that just random chance? I don't think. I think that, well, this is sign of one of the most genius modulations. First time you go to A major, which is the inversion of E major. And then he goes to F sharp minor, which is like the negative harmony or the inversion of G sharp minor, right? Extremely clever and very well put together, and that's Rachmaninoff. What else can be said? It's a teenager composing at its best here with gorgeous composition skills. So let's now break it down. So we have the period, then we have the sentence. The sentence, I didn't say the structure, but well, it's similar. So we have 3 plus 2 is a little bit asymmetrical, and it has the resolution on tonic, so it's closed. And then you have the same B1, it's 8 plus A and 4 plus 4, but modulating to F sharp, right? And after that, we have this descent, and if I'm not mistaken, it's 8 bars. So it's just, I think it's closer to B3, by the way, so I'll give it a new section name. It's B3, which is this 8 measures. And it features some interesting techniques, which we'll get to explain now. So let's go in order. We're moving back to B1. So what is happening here harmonically? What are these chords? Why it sounds so good? Well, we have C sharp minor, that's the tonic. That's a very direct chord, 1. But after the tonic, we have this. What is that? Well, it's the same dominant of the dominant that we were having at the beginning. I'll highlight it. It's dominant 7th of the dominant. You might be wondering, where did I hear that? Well, you've heard it here. Aha. And that same thing is here. And by the way, it's also with the 7th. I mean, the 7th is omitted here, 7th, but here you hear it with the 7th. And after that, what do we hear? We'll hear our lovely augmented 6th chord, right? That augmented 6th chord that resolves exceptionally because it does not belong there is there. And now he actually resolves this to where it should. So look here, this augmented 6th chord, if it would go to C sharp, and I think I was writing it somewhere here, so augmented 6th chord of F sharp, I'm not sure if this was clearly explained here, but I'll go again and highlight it, but the augmented sixth chord of F sharp has as dominant, is the dominant of C sharp. So the C sharp is dominant of F sharp minor. And when we have an augmented chord of F sharp minor, what we have is the augmented sixth that goes to C sharp. Why? Because augmented sixth chord, remember, always go to dominance, is this. I'm going to C sharp, and now that's the dominant of F sharp. So augmented sixth is there. And that's what he is doing here. So that augmented sixth now resolves to C sharp. And this is a very interesting way of thinking of the augmented sixth, because it's basically changing its whole meaning. The meaning of the augmented sixth is to go to the dominant of the dominant, like this. And the proper one in C sharp minor is this. That's not the one he does. He does this. Right? And this augmented sixth, by the way, it's in this case not, I'm just looking by the pages, but well, it is the German one. So this augmented sixth is supposed to go to G sharp, but it goes to C. So this is a new way of thinking of a cadence. You can, in Rachmaninoff style, you can try to go, let's think we're in C minor. So we, instead of doing this, Rachmaninoff is doing a tritone substitution of G for the D flat and does this. And invert it. Have it there. Right, if we were to do it in C minor, so let's just raise this a half step higher. Right, there we go. Sorry, let's take half step lower. That would be the cadence. So and if we're doing in D minor, right, that would be the equivalent. So you can explore this, but you'll be getting a very unique sort of 5-1. And it's that one where the 5 or the dominant, it's chromatically altered and it's played as a tritone substitution, and you're getting it to happen as an augmented sixth. Because really the concept behind that is if you have a dominant and you move it a tritone below, you get this. Right, so that's how it works. That's your dominant. And eventually this is how it works. It's tonic, dominant of the dominant, which is predominant chord, subdominant, dominant, and tonic. Right. After that we have this little motif, which kind of resembles the Bach motif. Right? It's not fully it, but it's a very beautiful melody. And it's clearly also this cross motif. Some people draw it like this. So you're seeing that D sharp to F sharp and the E that's staying. So it's a cross motif. And harmonically, it's just the tonic in first inversion that's being ornamented by a double neighbor tone. And that double neighbor tone happens to be, in this case, the second degree, and the other one is the fourth. So that's what we have. After it, we have a little bit of Beethoven, because it's circle of fifths in the bass. Right. And it's harmonized with a very clear suspension, right? So we have this descending sequence. Harmonically, this is 5-1. And here that would be 2-5-1, right? And this could be viewed as 6. So you have 6-2-5-1, which is A major, right? That goes to C sharp. After that, this is the same. And again, the same Bach motif. But instead of doing the 2-5-1, he does the same Bach motif or the cross motif. So I think we can highlight that motif with some color, but this is that motif. He does it now above and harmonizes it with a very lovely chord progression because it's in A major. So what we're having is tonic. We get to hear this second degree, right? And it's then this flat diminished seventh. So this is diminished seventh with the flat 6. And that resolves to tonic. So and in a way, by doing so, he's doing the chromatic scale that we were hearing at the beginning. And remember that that's A major is not out of nowhere, it's just the inversion of E major. Right, so we have it there. After this, B2. So what is that? Well, eventually we can label it also as an ABA inside, because you can see this. It's repeating the initial chord progression, but what we have is two series of dominants. So the first one is the dominant of C sharp minor, right? So dominant C sharp minor. That's why I'm saying ABA, because the C sharp would be like the representation of A. Then we have the dominance of F sharp minor. And F sharp minor, it's the continuation of that exploration of the dominant realm. So it's 5 and 1. All right. And basically all of this is just inversions of that 5-1 and F sharp minor. And now here we're going back to C sharp minor. That's why I'm putting this ABA form in terms of harmony. Now in terms of melody, it's just a descending scale. It moves down, 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 down from here. And by including the D natural, you get to hear a little bit of that Neapolitan and Phrygian feel that we were hearing from the beginning. Phrygian sonority. Neapolitan, bear in mind, is the name of the chord. Phrygian is the name of the scale. And here we get to hear the Neapolitan chord in its beauty. So it's D major. What is that chord progression? It's the Neapolitan that goes to the dominant of the dominant, and that is supposed to go to the dominant, and it does so here, but prior to that you get to hear a little bit of tonic with the seventh, and that tonic with seventh inverted, second inversion, it's very common because you would expect that in the precadential chord progression where it's like this. So it's, and we're arriving there to C sharp minor. Where is that fifth from taken? Well, it's the motive of the fifth. I think we already highlighted it, but there we have it. How did we highlight them the first time? Oh, we didn't. We'll just had this orange. Yeah, so we can put the orange again. Orange circle. There's this one. D A, D sharp, A sharp, E, and B. And after that, fortissimo. It's identical phrase. The only thing that changes is that Rachmaninoff is spreading the thing, so he's having this an octave higher. The bass stays, and that creates this very big leap that's required to be played quickly and swiftly, and helps to add to the dynamic that we have here, which is fortissimo, right? So it's also louder. But not many significant changes happen because this is the same. Also notice, and now that I'm playing it, I've played it very quickly the first time, but here, that motive, you have G, F, I'll write it here because it's the same thing, so it's going to be cleaner. But this direction, it's exactly the opposite here, right? So you're having and I think that's quite remarkable. I think that's clearly not something random, and it's also a very good example of this trochee where you're moving sort of, well, in this case, since both are moving downwards, it's not really that, but what you're seeing is an inverted reading. So basically, if you read this, I'll put it now. So if you read it from this direction, it's the same as this one, read backwards. That's what I wanted to say. So it's a retrograde motion played at the same time. So you can have this backwards counterpoint, right? It's backwards, but also the technical name for this technique is retrograde. So retrograde is when you're playing something in the inverted order, not the inverted pitch, because here, well, it also happens to be like it's up and down, but it's because we're reading it from end to start. And that's this backwards motion, which I think is really cool. And you have it the first time here, obviously, so it happens there. Right, so it's the background retrograde counterpoint. And after this, we have this sequence. Really, it's the equivalent of B2, so it's a B2 but ascending. I'll play B2 for you now. So B2 was this, right? So B2 had that, and now we have, and the chords are the same. You have 5-1 in F sharp minor with this 5-1. And then we have 5-1 in C sharp minor. Right. So basically, what happens afterwards is just this alternation of 5-1s that are in F sharp minor and 5-1s that are in C sharp minor. We'll write them here first. So that's 5-1, 5-1. And I'll just use colors to highlight which one is in C sharp and which one is in F sharp. But that is a very beautiful relationship because it's basically that F sharp that we said that was like the point of arrival because it was the opposite axis of the initial arpeggio that we were having. Remember that the opening arpeggio was moving upwards, and this one is going downwards. Right, and now we have this as 5-1. Right. Also, the way it's written, I'm still writing 5s and 1s. It's written as an emiola, right? But it's an emiola where Rachmaninoff clearly wants you to make it prominent, because when you play this, it can easily start to sound like a 2/4 time signature. You have 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2, right? So you're having that sort of alternation. And where is it coming from? It's coming from having two, or a feel of, let's say, two 8s, in where really the rhythm is going in 3/8. And bear in mind that these are triplets, so really it's a very sophisticated sort of emiola. Because normally when we think of emiolas, we would consider them or conceptualize them within the average or 2/4, 3/4 time signature, but here it's with this shifting. And he wants you to hear it because there are these accents here that clearly point to, well, it's an angular motion, but it's really pointing us to where the downbeat is in every beat of the 4/4. So he wants us to hear the 3/8 where the music is clearly doing the 2/8. So we have this grouping of two. And that's why, well, the emiola is very prominent here. Right, so let's do the colors that I said. So for C sharp minor, we'll be using, let's say, red. So all of the C sharp minor cadences. This is C sharp minor, that's C sharp minor, that's not C sharp minor. This is it. That's not. This is back to C sharp minor. And if I'm not mistaken, well, this is all is C sharp minor. Yeah. Now, which one are in F sharp? Well, we'll give them blue. So these are in F sharp. That one was in C sharp, by the way. Yeah, C sharp. This is in F sharp. And this is in F sharp. Right, so that's how it's structured. Now, by seeing this, now we might be also noticing something new. So we're seeing that this begins here. And there we have this octave lower copy. So this motive is repeated an octave below. Right? And it's repeated yet another time. But this is a great example of motivic fragmentation. So first we have an idea of 2 bars with its pickups, but it's basically 2 bars, so 1 and 2. And that is in C sharp minor and F sharp, right? So we have first C sharp minor, and then we have F sharp minor. And from that idea, we have a repetition. So it's again 2 bars. 2 bars. But after that, we have just 1 single bar. So what does he do? He removes the ending. So first we had this. We hear it again. And now we remove the ending, only have the opening opening bar with the 4 notes. And that's repeated again. And then we have only halves where he is doing the ending by itself, and it's done 3 times. So it's half a bar with ending. And this is basically how you do a perfectly clear motivic fragmentation. Where did we see that? We saw it in Beethoven's First Piano Sonata. And I think, well, it's clearly not a technique that people come up with randomly, but it's a well thought process where you're having a unit and then it happens to be a very perfect connector, because you're already here in the A G sharp. So you're basically in the final state of the condensation, you're hearing that. So in a way, it's a very well connected resolution. So the way he resolves the resolution of fragmentation. The way that he resolves this fragmentation, it's directly in connection with the opening. So that's quite a clever way to achieve it, because if you look into it closer, you'll see the A G sharp is already there. And now it's this A in G sharp, right? So in a way, it's all connected. You have this resolution of with the half bars and how they arrive there, right? Good. Well, so that's basically the middle section. All we have to do now to finish is to look at the ending. So we'll briefly just comment this. It's not extremely complicated. I mean, it has very unique chords, but basically the function of it is a pedal point of tonic. So why do you have a pedal point of tonic? Well, we had this dominant, we had this build-up. Actually, I've called it standing on the dominant, but it really like, it's a series of perfect cadences more than a standing on the dominant. But we can call it more like a cadenza, because the texture breaks there, and it's a good example. You have to create a virtuosic texture that's quite effective, sounds fast. It requires study, but it's not impossible to play. So I think this is a good reference for fast passages. And now after this, you have the coda, where we do have this pedal on the tonic. We were hearing the tonic a lot in the piece. It's from the beginning, you have that cadence. But the harmonies are very unique. So the first chord is not C sharp minor, it's the 6th degree, right? So 6th degree, it's A major. Why A major? We can just guess, but A major had a prominent role in that inverted cycle, what we were seeing. And A major is supposed to go maybe to dominant. No, but does he take it to there? No, he does this. That's a minor chord, that's the tonic, with added 6. So by adding the 6, we have this A sharp half diminished. So you can see it as a sharp 6th degree, right? Half dim. Then we have this. That's clearly an augmented 6th. So that's the augmented 6th chord. It's not written like that. It's written again as an A. In this case, it's the 6th dominant 7th. And after that, we have the 4th degree, F sharp major, right? So is F sharp major appearing for any reason? Well, maybe it's for the same reason of that inversion. A, C sharp, E, G sharp. Now we have C sharp, A, F sharp. And we're hearing basically both F sharps. We hear in major, minor, and that's his cadence. It's what we call a plagal cadence. Plagal cadence with major and minor. The first F sharp major is of dominant 7th, and again, it's not resolving to where it should. It's not going to be, but it's going to a half diminished chord again, another half diminished. This is the 2nd degree. And in the right hand, I think you can clearly see the F sharp minor chord, right? So that's creating this half diminished cadence. You can look into it as a 2nd degree with the 7th, or as an F minor chord, which is the 4th, with the added 6. And add 6 was already a concept we were seeing here. So we had this. That's the tonic add 6, and now this is the 4th add 6. And that's plagal cadence. I really like how Rachmaninoff doesn't hurry up to finish, so he's not like, all right, I've got the ending, I'm just throwing it off, but he is expanding the silence. So the silences here are really unique. I mean, in my previous video, which many of you haven't seen it, because from the stats I've saw that for some reason maybe the topics, when they are not so closely maybe associated to music analysis, they get less recommendations. But if you get to happen to be here, please watch that one. It's episode 10. I explain all sorts of different techniques on silences. And one of the things that he's doing here clearly, it's a very unique rhythmic device, because, and this is not always like people play it, but you have to count properly and have 3 beats there, 1 of rest, right? And then that silence is expanding there. So in a way, the silence or the pause that you're hearing acts as a resolution already of the piece. So you have this resolution of all of that tension by having a longer pause. So the moment you hear, oh, the chord didn't happen already, you can predict that it's going to be the tonic, and that's the end. All right, so that was it. I really hope that you found this useful. It's been quite an interesting journey to cover Rachmaninoff music. Rachmaninoff's music is in general much more complicated in terms of all of these developments and inner logic, and probably we've picked one of his easiest pieces because it's one of his early ones. If we were to pick maybe his sonata, it would take us an entire series of seminars. So without further ado, I'd like to thank you all for staying here with me. As a reminder, well, if you are interested in studying composition with me, you're welcome to do so. So you have the details in the video description. The materials that were used in this video are available on the platform Patreon. You can basically sign there and, well, download PDF files of the analysis that I'm providing here. And if you have any specific questions related to this piece or to composition in general, feel free to either do it through the comment sections, although I'm still a little bit behind answering comments, so I'll try to do my best to get there, or you can send me an email, which is available also in the video description. So hope you found this useful for composition. If you're a composer, well, I wish you a productive week ahead of music composition, and I'll be seeing you next Saturday. So take care and see you soon.